but sweltering heat and oppressive humidity will torment a cyclist lost deep in the jungles of Costa Rica. Every fall, hundreds of experienced cyclists descend on Costa Rica's Pacific coast to compete in one of the world's toughest mountain bike races, a 3-day, 250-mile trek through dense jungles and rugged mountains. In 2015, longtime Colorado cyclist Mark Lyons comes to compete in the event for the first time.
I went over there with several friends of mine as a team. I'd done several 100-mile mountain bike races, and I think I felt like I was ready.
At dawn on November 5th, the race begins, and Mark is off to a rough start.
My friends that were with me at that point could tell that I wasn't having a good day. I was told I looked very white. I didn't realize how much the weather would affect me. That day was up around 100-ish.
Mark not only has to think about the actual temperature outside, but what it will feel like. When he's out there biking long distances, he has to add 20 degrees to the thermometer. And it's so humid that his sweat isn't evaporating and cooling him down very effectively, and so that heat index is even higher still.
For Mark, the course is soon living up to its formidable reputation, as coastal roads quickly turn to muddy jungle trails where daily rain showers keep the humidity even higher.
One of the first hills we hit, people were walking, and these are high-end mountain bikers, and they're walking. You're pushing your bike through this thick, deep mud.
Mark stops to help a fellow racer struggling through a steep, boggy trench.
That's where my friend says, "Hey, I'll meet you down the road." And that's where we separated.
Now riding solo, Mark comes upon a 30-foot river crossing. There are no other racers around as he dismounts the bike.
I start walking across the river with my bike, and first dropping in the water, there was a relaxing, oh, that feels so good, that nice cool water. And there was a little chute between a couple rocks, and that's where I lost my footing. And I just went down that chute, and that's where I started picking up speed.
The river is 3 to 4 feet deep, and Mark is unable to resist its force. Still clinging to his bike, he's pulled under and bashed against the rocks before realizing it's either him or the bike, so he lets go.
I was like talking in my own head saying, I can't believe this is the way I'm gonna die, is in a river in Costa Rica. When I could feel air on my face, I'd just grab a breath and I'd go back under, and I'm bouncing off of rocks, basically pinballing down the river.
After what feels like an eternity, Mark slams into a log.
So I was facing the water coming at me, so it was pushing me up against the log. Just the force of the water, I couldn't get out of the water. I just had literally zero energy.
By some miracle, he's held onto his backpack. In it, he finds a packet of sports drink powder.
After standing there in the water for at least an hour, I took a little bit of the powder, figured it'd give me a sugar rush, and then I just kind of grunted a few times to fight to get my legs out, just to flop over on the side.
Now out of the river, but sopping wet, Mark takes stock of the situation.
I don't have my bike, which has my GPS on it. I'm checking my pockets. There's no gels, no cell phone. I was basically out of water, no food. I had lost my shoes in the river. There was so much pain everywhere. Everything hurt.
Too weak to walk, hours pass as Mark tries to regain his strength. As the night approaches, he decides to move to higher ground and try to find a place to sleep.
I knew that I had to move away from the river, but I have no energy. I can't even stand up, much less walk. So I start crawling up this slimy, muddy hill.
Mark leaves his empty powder packet on a rock, hoping it might eventually be spotted by searchers, before continuing his arduous ascent.
I just remember thinking, how am I gonna get through this? Because I was just so beat up at the time.
Battered, hungry, and in pain, Mark is crawling straight into the ominous darkness of the Costa Rican jungle. While competing in one of the toughest mountain bike races in the world, Colorado cyclist Mark Lyons is swept down a powerful river deep in central Costa Rica. Mark manages to escape the rapids, only to face a sleepless night in the sweltering jungle.
I was awake all night that night. I mean, there's no way I could sleep. I know there's big snakes out here. I know there's other animals. I could hear things out there.
Mark is spending the night strapped to a tree on a steep jungle slope. I asked survival psychologist Dr. John Leach about the biggest danger to him that night.
Costa Rica is home to some of the most venomous snakes on the planet, including the fer-de-lance.
Yeah, the fer-de-lance is a nasty piece of work. It's one of the most poisonous snakes on Earth. But when it comes to snakes, we do have our own built-in survival instinct for them.
Tell me about that.
It's the way they move. So if you look at the way they move, it's a sort of sinusoidal movement.
And you're talking this kind of classic
Yes.
snake movement.
The snake-like movement. Now, we don't notice it if we look at a snake straight on, but anything that moves like that, in that fashion, in peripheral vision, we have part of our brain that is evolved and adapted deliberately to pick up that type of movement. And as soon as we see that type of movement, we'll stop. We freeze, and then we check it out to see if it's a real threat or whether it's harmless.
Meanwhile, when Mark didn't show up at the end of the first race stage, his teammates start to worry. An official search party hunts through the night, but Mark is too far off course for anyone to suspect where he might be. At first light, with no help in sight, Mark sets off.
I figure if a helicopter came by, it would have to be right over me and I'd have to be in the perfect spot, and then it probably still couldn't see me. My plan was just stay out of the water, climb up this ridge, and it should just follow the river, and I should be able to go down a little ways and drop down and be at the road.
But climbing out is easier said than done.
Climbing that hill was a lot tougher than I realized. It was extremely steep, muddy, slimy. There was a lot of different things that were beating me up. I would grab some of these vines and they would have these like sewing needles that would just fill my hands.
What Mark could really use right now is a knife. Before metal, all knives were made from rock. And one of the best rocks to use if you have no experience is slate. Slate is basically compressed sediment, and it can be found all over the world. The great thing about slate is it's really easy to work with. All you have to do to create an edge is abrade it up against another rock. And this smooth, flat rock right here is perfect. First step is I want to wet my work surface so that I can create a slurry. You can see this muddy slurry that I'm generating on this rock. That's bits of this slate abrading off. So I've got a really nice rough edge right now. I want to switch to a finer grained stone, almost like you would use a finer sandpaper to get a better finish. The edges of this slate are really sharp. And in order to be able to really use this knife comfortably, I'm going to wrap on a vine handle. Whether harvesting leaves for shelter materials or cutting vines for cordage, a cutting tool like this is going to give Mark options in the jungle.
Fighting the stifling heat and humidity without sleep, food, or water, Mark is moving agonizingly slow, and the terrain is punishing.
I have 2 pair of socks, which are worse than maybe being barefoot as far as the mud went, because they were just slippery, slimy. They didn't grab anything. I did try to grab a couple large leaves, wrap them around my feet, and try to tie them on, help out my feet, and that really didn't work.
Mark had the right idea, trying to protect his feet by wrapping them in leaves. The only problem is that they fell off. Let me show you how to make a jungle shoe that'll stay on even in terrain like this. The only thing you need to make these are a few palm leaves and some flexible vine. You want 2 wingspans worth of vine. So here's 1, and then I'm gonna go 2, and that is per foot. I'm gonna go ahead and cut that off. So I'm gonna take my shoes off. Now that I've got these 2 loops hooked on my big toes, I'm gonna feed in my palm leaves. And you see I've got these 4 legs, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to take my palm leaf, I'm just gonna weave that over and under each of those legs. Now, they're a little loose because I could only weave them so tight. I'm gonna pull on these vines. It's gonna tighten these sandals up. There we go, like that. I'm gonna put my foot right on the sole, and these 2 vines leading out of the back here, I'm gonna bring those up over my ankle. Those are gonna be fed right down in the side here. Down in right here. It's gonna go right over the top of my foot. I'm gonna do one more right over the top front. Perfect. These are gonna come back. Just gonna tie right in front here. A pair of jungle sandals like this can help Mark protect one of his most important survival assets, his feet.
As I'm walking along, the sound of water is getting more and more faint. And instead of just continuing on, it's like I've got to drop down and figure out what's going on here. Something's not right. And when I did get down the hill, I'd come across this very small stream, and I knew something wasn't right there.
Realizing this isn't the roaring river that carried him off course, Mark is crushed. He backtracks, hoping to discover where he went wrong.
I followed that down quarter mile maybe, and then I came up on an intersection where that stream came into that main river.
Just as he spots the Y in the river, Mark also sees the empty drink packet he left on the rock, right back where he started.
I've seen where people get lost or out in the woods and they do a big circle and come back to where they started, and I always thought to myself, that would never happen to me, and it happened to me.
Over 24 hours have passed since endurance cyclist Mark Lyons was dragged downriver during a race in the jungles of Costa Rica. Exhausted and facing searing heat and humidity, Mark is desperate to make it back to the road in hopes of rescue. But after following the wrong river upstream, Mark is now right back where he started.
I guarantee it had taken me 5 to 6 hours to do this little loop. Then I was concerned because now I've just wasted half my day and I'm starting over. But the good part of that is now I knew I had to follow the larger river back.
But in order to trek up the main river, he'll need to cross the raging current that got him into this mess in the first place.
After going down the river, that was the last thing I wanted to do, is get back in the water. But I found this little area that looked like it was fairly calm, and I took my time and I got across the river.
Mark is in a lot of pain. He doesn't know it, but his kidneys and liver are shutting down due to dehydration. But he worries drinking river water could do more harm than good.
I had found what looked like a spring coming out of the ground and started drinking that water. After a few hours of drinking that, I could feel my stomach starting to bother me. That wasn't a good decision, I realized.
Water is at the top of the list of survival priorities, and without it, Mark's body is not going to be able to replenish what it needs to pick up and keep moving forward. One of the best sources of drinking water in the jungle actually comes from one of the world's fastest growing plants, and that's bamboo. Believe it or not, there is fresh drinking water stored inside the hollow cavities of this bamboo. So if you had a machete, you could just chop it right off and dip down in and start drinking. But I'm gonna drill a hole with my knife that goes right through this wall of the bamboo. You wanna go for bamboo that's in the middle stages of growth. Nothing too old or yellow and nothing really young. This right here is about perfect. Nice and green, maybe just starting to yellow towards the top of the plant. Okay, perfect. You can see the water running out of this hole. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take a smaller piece of bamboo, gonna stick it right in that hole. And look, it's coming out just like a small faucet. Look how clear that is. The great thing about this water is it doesn't require purification. The plant has done all of the filtering for you. As long as you can find bamboo in the jungle, you'll have a sustainable source of water.
Trekking through the thick jungle in stifling heat and humidity with no water and no food, Mark's energy is soon totally depleted.
My legs were so beat up that I remember coming up to vines that would be 6 inches, a foot off the ground, and I'd have to lift my leg up to put it over there because I couldn't lift my legs on my own. I was beat. I was starting to doubt if I was going to make it back to the road that day. The sky started getting very, very dark. You know, that was depressing.
Thinking that night is falling, Mark reluctantly prepares for it.
It started raining, and I lay down just to rest, and it's just pouring. It's raining buckets.
But after 45 minutes, the pounding rain relents and the skies clear again. It's not quite nighttime yet.
Very, very faintly, I thought I heard the sound of an engine or something. I'm thinking, well, I've got to be close to the road, and my goal was to get there today. So I need to get up and go. And I was in such bad shape that it took me probably 15 minutes to get off the ground.
After another hour of struggling through the labyrinth of dense vines, Mark finally stumbles onto the road.
Exhausted is a complete understatement, I was just hanging by a thread by then, but you know, it's getting dark. Now it definitely is getting dark. And then around the bend, the ATV comes down. We had a police jacket on.
Rescued at last by the search party that was still canvassing the area, Mark is taken to a hospital where they find his kidneys and liver are in critical condition. He also has deep scratches all over his arms and legs and several broken ribs. He spends nearly a week recovering before returning home to Colorado.
What amazed me the most being out there is how strong your mind is. I was able to literally just shut pain off to get through it. I thought that was interesting.
One small slip and Mark went from an adventure race to a race to save his own life in a place he'd never been before. His excellent physical condition and calm thinking improved his chances of survival. But still yet, there's no substitute for preparation and knowledge of what to do in an unforgiving and hostile environment.